Um, I'm Helen Foster and I'm the Teaching Collections and e-textbook Programme Manager at the University of Manchester Library, and today I'll be presenting our next chapter, Reimagining Teaching Collections with Open Educational Resources, OER, at the University of Manchester Library. I did try to do some sort of a pun with our and OER, but with my strong Wigan accent, it didn't quite land. So I'm just going to move swiftly on. And I'll just give a bit of an overview of what I will be talking about today, just to make sure you're in the right place and give you an opportunity to leave if you think it sounds awful. So I'll start with, I'm going to be talking about our Flip to Open project, which explores the adoption and creation of open educational resources at the University of Manchester Library. So I'll start by giving some context, both institutional context and within the library, about why the work is important and how it has emerged. And then I'll talk about what we've done so far, including some of the key challenges that we've encountered along the way. And I'll finish by talking about what we hope to do next and what we hope to achieve in the long term. So I'll just give a quick definition of OER. I'm sure many people in the room will be familiar with the term, but for those who aren't, UNESCO defined OER as learning, teaching and research materials in any format and medium that reside in the public domain or are under copyright that have been released under an open license that permits no cost access, reuse, repurpose, adaptation and redistribution by others. So a bit of context about the University of Manchester, and I'm going to focus on what's most relevant to this project. So for those of you who don't know, we are located just further up Oxford Road. That is the Whitworth building that you can see there. We serve over 46,000 students and 12,000 staff, and we were founded in 1824 as the UK's first modern civic university. And being a civic university really means placing public good and community engagement and access to knowledge at the heart of what we do, which I think is really important grounding for our work with OER, as they align really strongly with these values, because of the focus on removing barriers and widening access and really rethinking who owns and benefits from knowledge. Actually, since going to press with this presentation, the Times have updated the rankings for 2026, and we are now ranked #1 globally for social and environmental impact. And social responsibility is a core strategic priority for the university. And last year, we published the Manchester 2035 strategy, which really reinforces that idea through its strapline, from Manchester for the world. And these are really important foundations for our work with OER, as we really believe that OER can demonstrate our social responsibility by opening up our knowledge and sharing that knowledge more widely. So our Flip to Open project really aligns with the university's strategic direction, which is underpinned by 5 big leaps, including flexible, personalised and digitally enabled learning. So OER directly support this ambition by enabling more flexible, accessible and personalised learning experiences that teaching staff can adopt specifically to the needs of their students. Also, as part of the new strategy, the university is really rethinking what it means to be a civic university in the 21st century. And OER present a real opportunity for the library to contribute meaningfully to that vision. So I'll give a bit of background now about the library and where the Flip to Open project sits. So we are a very large academic library and we have over 300 staff across around 20 teams. I manage the teaching collections team, which essentially provides all of the resources that students need for their modules. Our core services include reading lists online and the e-textbook programme. Our reading list service is hosted on Ganto and it's open to all modules across the university, and we currently have around 75% take up. And our e-textbook programme provides 1 core e-textbook per module on a one-to-one basis, and that's delivered via core text, and it's essentially the electronic equivalent of us giving a print book to all of the students. And the scale of that is quite large. So this year we provisioned 126,000 e-textbooks to 35,000 students across 1,000 modules at the university. And for that programme, we negotiate directly with the publishers rather than via core text. We launched that programme in 2014, so it's just over a decade old now. And we've reached a natural point of reflection for that programme as well, where we're just thinking about whether that model is still the right one in a rapidly changing landscape. Our services are driven by academic demand, so my team don't play any sort of role in suggesting titles. We just buy what the academics tell us that they want, and that's communicated through our reading list system and our purchasing policy. Our services also support the university's policy on additional costs, which outlines that students shouldn't be expected to pay additional costs associated with their modules or their courses on top of tuition fees. So our current model is increasingly bringing challenges, which I'm sure will resonate with many colleagues in the room. One of our biggest challenges is how do we provide equitable access to learning materials whilst managing rising ebook costs? Pricing is a constant concern, and our annual negotiations with publishers are unpredictable, and some of the unit costs for our e-textbook programme are becoming unsustainable. We are also constrained by restrictive licensing models for some ebooks and e-textbooks. Often titles are only available through unsuitable license models or through bundled subscription packages that don't meet our needs. And the changing supplier landscape creates a lot of uncertainty as well. We're also seeing declining student engagement, and that's not just with e-textbooks, but that's across library services more broadly. This year, we've seen a significant drop in engagement with our e-textbook programme, and we're also seeing fewer views by students of reading lists. And at the same time, demand is shifting from our teaching staff as well. We're seeing a growing expectation for more flexible resources, and we're getting increased frustrations from academics who don't want to be locked into the traditional publishing cycles, and also with e-textbooks not providing the interactivity that they would want. And we're also seeing increased demand for access to learning resources from non-registered students through Manchester Online, which is our sort of lifelong learning offer. And all of these needs are not being met through the traditional textbook model. So could OER be the solution? We think that OER are uniquely positioned to address many of the challenges with the current model. Predominantly, they can reduce financial pressure as they are free at the point of use. And this can reduce our dependence on unsustainable pricing models. And rather than continually negotiating increasing prices for diminishing value, we can invest in resources that we own and control. They remove access barriers through open licensing, so there's no login required. And this is particularly relevant for our lifelong learning by Manchester Online. And they support accessibility and compatibility with assistive technologies. They also align strongly with our institutional priorities and the strategic direction of the university. And they can offer opportunities for co-creation between staff and students, helping to diversify content and make learning more relevant and inclusive. Many institutions are also reporting increased engagement with OERs in comparison to traditional textbooks, so they could help to address the declining student engagement issue. So with these benefits in mind, we launched our Flip to Open project in August last year. So the project initially focused on piloting Scylla, which for those of you who don't know, is an AI tool which is designed to identify OER alternatives to commercial textbooks. So in my team, we spent quite a while testing the tool and gathering feedback to share with Scylla on how we might need it to be improved before we could launch it to teaching staff to get them to use it. But we didn't feel that it particularly was suited to our own workflows, and we didn't think that our teaching staff would engage with it. So at this point, we started to think about whether we might widen the scope of our project and really think about where we might be able to add value. So at that point, we started to think about options for OER creation as well. And so we started to explore Pressbooks as an option for OER creation, and we took out a one-year subscription to pilot using Pressbooks. A key priority for us was engaging our teaching staff. So because our reading list service is demand driven, any meaningful institutional shift towards OER has to have the academic buy-in. So in January this year, we launched our project to teaching staff through an introduction to OER webinar, which was based on Brunel's Introduction to OER workshop. So the UK OER community offer train the trainer sessions on the running of this workshop, and I've included a link to the next sessions on this slide, and I highly recommend signing up to those if you are interested in getting started with this at your institution. We did modify the workshop slightly for our initial webinar, just because it was designed to be a sort of 90-minute session, but we wanted to make sure that our academics had time to attend and get them on board. So we just launched our project with, I think it was sort of 30 minutes, like an introduction webinar. And we weren't sure if we would get anybody signing up at all, but we were really delighted to have almost 60 registrations. And that was from staff across all faculties of the university as well. So the webinar focused on the 3 core strands of the project, and they are identifying OER using Scylla, creating OER using Pressbooks, and building an institutional community of practice, because we know that there's a lot of academics and teaching staff who are using OER in their own practice, and we want to try and create somewhere that they can share that experience with colleagues. So in the webinar, we provided an overview of OER use on current reading lists at the University of Manchester. So we did a bit of work to look at how many OERs are currently being used. And I think the number was around 1% of all book citations were OER. So it was a very small percentage. And then we gave short demonstrations of Scylla and Pressbooks, and then we shared opportunities for academics to get involved in testing after the webinar. So following the webinar, we sent a sort of Microsoft form, and we just asked them to say whether they were interested in adopting an OER, testing Scylla, or creating their own OER. And we tried to put a test together that they could follow to test Scylla. That was just based on a short activity in a Microsoft form to gather feedback. But we didn't have any uptake in academics in testing Scylla or looking for opportunities to adopt existing OER. But we did have an awful lot of interest in Pressbooks and OER creation. So following that initial webinar, we followed up with a second webinar, which was during Open Education Week in March this year. And that just focused on Pressbooks. So we gave an overview of Pressbooks, and we had somebody from Pressbooks give a demonstration. And that went out to the academics who had expressed an interest in creating their own OERs. And at that point, we started to shift the focus of the project to align with the demands that we were seeing from our teaching staff. And we are now prioritising OER creation through Pressbooks, which is where we're really seeing the strongest engagement and interest. So up to this point, we've taken out a subscription to Pressbooks, which gives us 10 titles per year. And 8 of those have already been allocated to teaching staff across the university, and that's across all faculties. And of those 8, at least 5 of them are already in active production. And these include phonetics and phonology for speech and language therapists, the AI crisis in HE, fashion product development, foundations, processes and practice, and introduction to programming. And what's been really interesting is the breadth of coverage across all disciplines, as well as the different motivations that academics have for engaging with Pressbooks and wanting to create their own OER. So, for example, with the AI crisis in HE, the author wasn't primarily focused on creating a textbook as such, but he'd written this book and he wanted to get it out as soon as possible, because I think it's about how the AI bubble is going to burst. So there's a real urgency with him getting that information out there. And Pressbooks really appeal to him because it allows him to avoid traditional publishing cycles and the slower timescales associated with that. In contrast to that, introduction to programming is really driven by a desire to widen access to programming. So the academic behind that really wants people around the world to be able to teach themselves how to do coding and how to program. And so it's a real opportunity for him to get that knowledge out there to as many people as possible. And it's been really great to see such a diverse range of content being created, and a diverse range of motivations as well. Another key area that we are currently developing is the OER toolkit. So this toolkit is designed to support teaching staff with both identifying and creating OERs. It's going to cover a wide range of topics, and we hope that over time it will include successful case studies of OER adoption and creation at the University of Manchester. And it's also been a really effective way for us to build our own expertise and understanding of how to use Pressbooks. The toolkit really just started out as a test so that I could figure Pressbooks out and support academics with using it. But then creating it really helped me to sort of understand the system, and whilst delivering something that could be quite valuable to our teaching staff as well. We also recognise that we need to have a sort of single point of truth for all our OER information that we were getting out to academics. And we considered a traditional subject guide or a website, but we felt that having a toolkit would be a more interactive and engaging way that we could support our teaching staff, and also an example of what an OER could look like. We hope that eventually it will be a useful resource, not just internally, but also for other institutions, particularly those who might be at an earlier stage in their OER journey. So I'm hoping to have this published in the summer, and we will share it more widely, potentially through the UK OER community of practice if anybody's signed up to that. So I'll touch on some of the challenges that we've faced over the last year. The biggest by far has been staff time. It's very much a passion project supported by a small team, and whilst we do have staff from across the library on the project board, it's a small number of colleagues who are actually doing the work alongside our already busy jobs. And when things get busy in our day jobs, then that has to take priority. So it's been difficult to find the time, particularly when we've had so much interest from teaching staff. We don't want to so we want to support that, so it's been quite difficult to find the time to do that. And also our teaching staff are also very busy, so it's not just managing our own workloads, it's trying to engage with them at the right time and work around their own timescales as well. Given the current staffing context, there's no opportunity to bring in any additional resource to support the project. So we really just had to think carefully and strategically about where we focus our efforts, and also be realistic about what we can deliver. We've also encountered some challenging feedback from teaching staff, so it hasn't all been engagement and like excitement. So for instance, one academic questioned why we should expect them to produce OERs on top of their jobs when they're not getting paid any extra money for it, which was an important concern, and it highlights some of the cultural barriers that we still face around OERs that we still need to navigate. As with any sort of new technologies and systems, there have been challenges around adoption and confidence of the new tools that we've been exploring. So that's both Zilla and Pressbooks. Supporting library colleagues as well as teaching colleagues to engage with a new platform and new ways of working obviously takes a lot of time and ongoing support. And another big challenge has been navigating a changing supplier landscape. So a couple of months ago, Zilla were acquired by VitalSource. And that really exposed the risk of relying on commercial platforms within an OER model, and highlighted a key tension in the project, in that whilst we're aiming to move towards more open and sustainable models, we are still operating within a commercial ecosystem that doesn't always necessarily align with those values. So that's really highlighted the importance of reducing reliance on commercial intermediaries, and highlighted the need for more institution-led open approaches. So looking ahead to our next steps, we'll be focusing on reviewing the first year of the project and thinking about where we want to focus our efforts in the next year. So in the coming months, we hope to support the current cohort of authors to successfully publish and promote their work. We want to continue to develop and launch the OER toolkit, and we want to explore more opportunities to expand OER adoption across the university. We also want to strengthen our engagement with the wider OER community across the UK. There's so much amazing work going on across the UK that we've been inspired by. And we want to also develop an OER policy so that we have a framework of how we're going to choose which books we can support as we grow our press books production. A long-term goal is to start flipping commercial textbooks to OERs. And we do believe that it's achievable, but it's obviously not a quick win. It requires a lot of long-term investment and collaboration. So to get there, we really need to work in partnership with teaching staff to not just create OERs, but adopt existing OERs and adapt existing OERs that align with their curriculum. We want to build their confidence in adopting OERs as credible and high quality alternatives to commercial textbooks as well. And we want to develop more sustainable workflows for editing, updating and maintaining content over time. And we think that by doing this successfully for one module, we can create a model that can be shared as best practice within the institution and hopefully in the long term scaled up to support a much broader shift away from commercial provision, which could then be replicated across other courses and externally as well. So whilst flipping one book might start with a small step, might sound like a small thing, it's actually a really important step towards a much bigger goal, which is to build a sustainable, scalable and institution-wide approach to open teaching materials as a longer-term solution to many of the challenges that we're currently facing now and a bit of an insurance against some of the challenges that we might face in the future.